Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Megan Crum, and I'm a professional development specialist with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or ISAC. And you are joining us today for the overview and enhancements of the FAFSA and alternative application. So just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Know that the session is being recorded and you'll have access to it after today. We'll be posting it on our webpage here in the coming weeks. In addition to this, if you or your colleagues are joining us and you're having any issues with audio, you can have WebEx call you at a number you prefer rather than joining through your computer. The Q&A feature is available for you to ask any questions that you may have about what's happened so far with the FAFSA and alternative application. That is located if you're on your desktop at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen with the little question mark on it. You can view any of our upcoming webinars that we have. We have several this month at isac.org/pd/webinars. And then we'll talk about continuing education and professional development hours at the end, but they are available for today's session. So if you're not aware of who ISAC is, we are the state's financial aid and college access agency. So we administer several grant programs, including the MAP grant, and several teaching programs as well. But on the team that I am on for the professional development team with my colleagues that you see as panelists here, we provide professional development offerings across the state on different financial aid programs, on state programs, supporting students from underrepresented areas, so first gen, people of color, and then also understanding student loan repayment and forgiveness options. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know or let the team know in the Q&A. But that is who ISAC is. And today, hopefully, I'm sure all of you are here for because of the changes to the FAFSA and the alternative application. So we're going to do just a very quick overview of the types of financial aid applications available to students and what they look like right now because some home pages have changed. And then we're going to dive right into the enhancements and the changes that have happened to the FAFSA and alternative app. So first, just know how do students apply for financial aid, whether you're a first-year counselor or you're new to this work, or you've been here a while like I have. There is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. That is the biggest form kind of that students complete, and the Department of Education is the largest source of that. It comes from the Office of Federal Student Aid. We also here at the state have the alternative application for Illinois financial aid, or the alternative app. It's not the RISE Act application. It's not the alternative FAFSA. It is the alternative application for Illinois financial aid, and it is only for state financial aid. And then there are other forms that students will potentially complete. So this could be institutional. It also could be the CSS profile. We call all of these financial aid applications because the FAFSA is not the only application in existence. And that is because we have an alternative application, but there's also the CSS profile. So we call it a financial aid application. But if you say something specific, you certainly can, but we all call them, on my team at least, we all call them financial aid applications. So the FAFSA is the biggest one that most people know as and refer to, or the free application for federal student aid. This is the new homepage. So if you've started FAFSAs already with your students, or if they come back next week, or if you've gotten questions about it, this is what the homepage looks like. What I'm going to point out to you though is it's going to really highlight the 24-25 FAFSA, okay? And that is because, as some of you may know, that students will complete the last year's form because they're in that current academic year. So they may try to think, oh, I'm in 23-24, I'm going to graduate this year, I should complete the 23-24 application. And some may, if you graduate early, which they have, but most of your students are going to complete a 24-25. So the FAFSA is now really made sure that it's highlighting in point of center to complete the 24-25 FAFSA. That is what most students will do right now. But you'll notice that it's kind of in big bold letters: start a new form, access the existing form. But then at that very bottom, you'll see, right, it says need to access last year's form. And that's how they've referred to it as now. That is, it is last year's form and not the current year. So it is available at no cost. Free is in the name. None of your students should be paying to complete this application. ISAC offers free resources for you as professionals, but also to your students and families to complete this application, as well as the alternative app. The FAFSA is used to apply for federal financial aid programs. It is also used by some states for their state financial aid. ISAC is one of them that we use that for. In addition, Some colleges will use it to award institutional aid, and that is because the institution wants to see that the student and family has attempted to apply for and gain federal and state funds before only receiving institutional aid. Now, in addition to this, what's going to happen, there are certain eligibility requirements students must meet in order to be eligible to complete a FAFSA and be eligible for federal student aid. So for eligibility, they have to have a high school diploma or equivalent. They must be a student, must be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. They must have a valid Social Security number or an SSN. The student must be enrolled in an eligible degree or certificate program. They have to make satisfactory academic progress or SAP, and then they have to sign a certification statement saying on the FAFSA, yep, they are going to use the funds that they intend to use them for. So those are the biggest eligibility criteria for federal financial aid. But you may ask us, well, who is considered an eligible non-citizen? These are those folks like here you see on your screen. These individuals are most likely going to have what is known as an alien registration number, an A number. It is an 8 or 9-digit number starting with the letter A that they'll need to report on the FAFSA, as well as their Social Security number once they have one established for them. So who is considered an eligible non-citizen? We have a U.S. permanent resident card holder, a conditional green card holder as well. Someone who is the holder of an arrival departure record, which is an I-94 form from the Department of Homeland Security, so DHS, with the following designations. So they have to have one of these designations under the I-94 form. There are others, but for purposes of financial aid, they have to have one of these. So it's refugee, asylum granted, parolee, a T visa holder, or a Cuban Haitian entrant. In addition, for an eligible non-citizen, someone must be can be a holder of a valid certification from the Department of Health and Human Services, or DHHS, with a certification saying they're a victim of human trafficking. And then 2 additions that were added within this past year for the 23-24 year, as well as the 22-23 award year, is the Afghan Special Immigrant Lawful Permanent Resident. So if they entered here in the U.S. between July of 21 to September 22, so it's the end of the month, so September 30th, they are also eligible for federal financial aid under that program for the Afghan arrivals. In addition, Ukraine parolees. So if they came to the States under the United for Ukraine program between February of 2022 to September of 2023, they are also eligible for federal student aid under that program. So here's the alternative application. The homepage should not look too unfamiliar to some of you, but if you're new to this, this is what the homepage looks like. You'll notice that a student will need to select which year that they are applying for aid. Similar to the FAFSA, the alternative application for Illinois financial aid does offer a drop down of to complete the 24-25 or the 23-24 application. Most of your students who are completing alternative app will complete a 24-25 application. This is still patterned after the FAFSA. I think that's very important to remember, is that there were very small changes to the alternative application in the grand scheme of things. FAFSA has the larger amount of changes that have happened in the last week and the last even 18 months. But for the alternative application, which is our state's financial aid application, we've had very small changes to the application. Similar to the FAFSA, it is available at no cost, but this is only for state aid financial aid. It is only for Illinois financial aid. It's specifically for the MAP grant, okay? So this is for qualifying undocumented students who meet certain criteria, are eligible to apply for the alternative application to apply for a MAP grant. Again, some colleges do use it to award institutional aid. It's still the same logic of they want to see that the student has attempted to gain access to state financial aid before only being awarded institutional aid. So this is the criteria that a student must meet for a qualifying undocumented student. So it's the law that we use for our tuition equity law, what we know is the RISE Act. And what governs the alternative application for their criteria. And so the law defines an Illinois resident as any person who is deemed an Illinois resident for tuition purposes, because we have a tuition equity law. And so in order to be eligible to complete the alternative application, a student must be able to answer yes to all 5 of these, okay? It's not just 1, it's not just 3, it has to be all 5 criterias. So they had to have resided with a parent or guardian while attending an Illinois public or private high school. They had to have graduated from a public or private high school or received the equivalent of a high school diploma. They had to have attended school in Illinois for at least 3 years as the date that they graduated from high school or received the equivalent of the high school diploma. Those 3 years does not have to be consecutive. They could have done 2 years at high school and then a year at middle school or a year of elementary school, as long as it's 3 years that they've been in the school system in Illinois and have graduated from Illinois. And then one of the other things is they must provide an institution with an affidavit stating that the individual will file an application to become a permanent resident of the United States at the earliest opportunity that is given to them. So this is built into the application already, the affidavit that they sign, the student signs and submits. In the event that some questions that we get about the alternative application is, well, what if an opportunity never presents itself for that student to become a permanent resident? Then the student isn't circumventing the law or anything like that. They are right on track. It's just that if during the time that they are receiving the funds and that an opportunity becomes available for them to become a permanent resident, they have to take it because they signed that affidavit. And then lastly, they had to not establish a residence outside of Illinois. Now, for whether a student is completing a FAFSA or the alternative application, both have dependency statuses, meaning a student is deemed a dependent or an independent student for financial aid purposes. So a dependent student means that they can only answer no to all of the dependency questions, which means that that student will need to report their information as well as their parent or parents' information on one of the forms. Students should not be completing both. It's either going to be a FAFSA or the alternative application. It should not be both. Now, they certainly could still complete a FAFSA and a CSS profile, but students should not be completing both a FAFSA and alternative application. It's going to be one or the other. Now, an independent student is where they're going to be able to answer yes to one of the dependency questions that are found on either the FAFSA or the alternative application. And if they can answer yes, what's going to happen? Only that student's information is then reported as well as their spouse if they're married. Now, for parents, you may have heard that parents have changed for reporting purposes for the FAFSA. And so, but we want to make sure to be clear of like what has not changed, and that is who is considered a parent. So who is a parent for purposes of financial aid is adoptive parents, biological, and step parents while they're married to the biological or adoptive parent. Those 3 are the only 3 types of parents that can be reported on a FAFSA or alternative application. No one else should be reported on a FAFSA. So even if you have a student who is in legal guardianship, may live with an aunt and uncle, and they are their person that is for all other intents and purposes for school-related information, but they have not gone through a court. They are not meant to be reported. That aunt, uncle, grandparent, whoever should not be reported on a FAFSA or an alternative application. Now, if you have parents or work with parents that either the biological or adoptive parents, but they are unmarried but live together and they're their partners, here they are, it's important to note that students are required to report both of their information. Even though they're unmarried, on the FAFSA, it will give them an option of what is your parents' marital status, and it will give them the option of unmarried but live together. Now, for parents who are divorced or separated, this is where the biggest changes happen that you probably may or may not be aware of, is that previously it was with whom the child had lived with for over 51% of the time. It is now based on, for divorced or separated parents, a student that will report their parent who provides the most financial support, who has provided the most financial support within the last 12 months. So that may be a parent that is not who they live with, but it may often will be the parent that they live with, and know that for some of this is not going to change. It's still going to be students are reporting the parent that they live with because they do provide the most financial support. But there will be cases for some of you, for your students, that are having to provide students are having to provide information about their other parent that they don't live with, but they do provide the most financial support. Now, in the case you have parents that are like, nope, it's per our custody agreement, it is truly 50-50. There are 365 days in the year, y'all. That is an odd number. And in the same logic, it's of where does that leave you, right? Which parent is reported? If parents truly are like, nope, it is 50-50, at that point, if the financial support is equal, then the student must report the parent which has the greater income and assets, which again may not be the parent that they live with. So knowing that it's really important that for some of your students, this may not change, but it's going to be who provides the most financial support within the last 12 months in the case of divorced or separated parents. Now, what information is needed to be reported on the FAFSA and the alternative application? Since the alternative application is patterned after the FAFSA, we do ask for similar information. So for FAFSA and alternative app, families will be asked to report information about their 22 federal income tax returns, their W-2s, other records of income, income earned from work, businesses, child support received, and any other untaxed income, as well as information about investments if those folks are required to report investments. Not everyone is now required to answer questions about investments, but if they are, those are the ones that you see on the screen. The biggest one is now the change in businesses and farms. If it is a small business that a family owns, they are required to report that as an investment if the investment questions are asked of that family. In addition, for the list of colleges that a student wants to have, for FAFSA, a student can now list up to 20 schools on the form, and the alternative app can a student can list up to 10 MAP approved schools. So they're only going to see Illinois schools and not schools across the country. For FAFSA specifically, students must have a valid social or an SSN. For parents who don't have a social, that's A-OK. They're going to enter all zeros there in that field. For students who are an eligible non-citizen, they're going to enter their A number or that alien registration number, and then an FSA ID. That's the biggest one. They're going to need to, both a parent and student has to have an FSA ID now to access the form and sign electronically. For the alternative app, a student will need a student profile for the alternative application. Parents don't have to create one. A parent social, if they have one, but if they don't have one, we're going to follow the same process of those parents will just simply enter 0 into the field on the alternative application. And then what is known as a personal identification number or a PIN for both the student and the parent to sign the alternative app electronically. So that was just a very brief overview of the forms themselves. And I'm going to get into now the enhancements. So as we do this, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'm going to start with the alternative app because that has lesser changes than the FAFSA does. So the alternative application for the 24-25 year is now available. It is launched. It is ready to go. We have not heard any concerns from counselors or from our team that has gone and done workshops that they've not been able to complete an alternative application. It's up and running. It's ready to go. So it's still patterned after the FAFSA and still collects very much the same information. A student aid index, or what you also may know it now as an EFC right now, it will be calculated, but the EFC has changed to SAI, to student aid index, but it will be calculated. And then some questions have been eliminated from the alternative application to simplify the application. So since we really did try to pattern it after the FAFSA, you're not going to see the questions about driver license questions because we don't need those questions to determine eligibility for a MAP grant. So there's some questions have been removed to help simplify the form, but know that when we talk about tax information, families still need to manually report their tax information on the alternative application. Nothing is changing though with the pre-screening questions or the login process or the eligibility criteria or the signature process. So for those of you who have helped students and their families go through an alternative application, those 3 things that you see on the screen are not changing. They still need a PIN to sign and certify the form. Students still have to complete the affidavit and whatnot. So that is not changing. In addition, though, there still will be help text provided. And in the event, once a student needs to make a correction or make an update to their form, financial aid administrators on the back end, right, do have the ability and will continue to have the ability to make corrections on behalf of the student, but also provide professional judgment adjustments based on the information reported. So now the FAFSA, so as I mentioned, there was not a lot of change with the alternative app. It's up and running, ready to go for you, for your students to complete. It is the FAFSA that we have encountered, and maybe you all as well, several challenges during this soft launch period that the FAFSA is in at the moment, but it is available. I have gotten through a FAFSA. I'm an independent student, but my FSA ID has been established for quite some time. So, but the form was quite easy to get through. But for your families that are new to this process, they may find it a little more cumbersome. But FSA has done a soft launch of this that allow for the form for them to monitor submissions and conduct maintenance on the form in real time. So if you were trying to access the form on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, you may have seen that the form was grayed out at some point to not complete. But for now, for what we've seen this last week, that it's up and running full time, but they are sharing via social media FSA of any planned outages or issues that they're finding. A rating room had been established at the very beginning just to help for the traffic to the site. So as your students come back to school and you start helping them during the day, if the flow of traffic has gotten too much, that waiting room will be established again by FSA. And then the role-based completion of the form is active and moving forward, that students and parents will both need an FSA ID to complete the form. So welcome to new terminology. And so you may have seen, if you've already done a FAFSA by now with students, is that what's going to happen is they're going to see different language. You may have different language than what you're used to. So there's household size, which now is referred to as family size. There is the expected family contribution, or what you know as EFC potentially, is now renamed the Student Aid Index, or SAI. The Student Aid Report, or the SAR, is now renamed to the FAFSA Submission Summary. There is no acronym for that. That will not be released until later this month. I'll talk about processing delays here in a little bit, but that is what the name has been renamed to, as the FAFSA Submission Summary. And then a person reporting information on the FAFSA is now considered a contributor. A student is considered a contributor, as well as a parent, or both parents are considered contributors to the form. Now, students are going to be required this year to answer questions about their race and ethnicity. These are not shared with the colleges. That's very important to know. They're purely for research purposes only. So you'll see that once a student selects their race and ethnicity, it's going to open up a drop down of options that a student will be able to select to say if they're Italian American, whatever it may be. And they're going to be able to answer those questions as select all that apply. A parent wizard tool has been developed to help families figure out, especially in the cases of divorced or separated parents, which parents should be reported on the FAFSA. This, again, is just specific to the FAFSA, but that parent wizard tool is built into the application and walks that student through that. The save key has been removed. I think hallelujah for that. No more trying to figure out what number to put there in the very beginning. Once a student gets logged in, they're logged in. Nothing else will have to be done. So that has been removed from the online form. As I mentioned, the EFC has changed to the SAI, and you're going to ask me, well, Megan, what's the difference? The difference is the definition. It's still going to do what you know the EFC as. The Student Aid Index is going to still calculate a student's eligibility for federal financial aid and some state financial aid. It's still going to do that, okay? What just happened is, though, is the definition. The SAI will hopefully give a more accurate reflection of what a student and their family can actually afford for their college, for their expenses for education, rather than an estimated number. In addition, this number can be negative for that. So if you all have been working on a FAFSA so far, have seen that, please let us know. We've seen it only in the financial aid estimator tool so far, but if you've seen that as well, a negative number for an SAI, we'd love to know that if you have. So yes, everyone needs an FSAD, and this is where we're seeing the most challenges right now in this past week for students and parents, specifically for parents who do not have socials, to create that, so that we were aware that this process was going to be available once the FAFSA became available. And so for parents who do not have a social, They can now create an FSA ID, but they are experiencing probably the most challenges right now because they're getting several error messages that either there was already an identity match or that they need to call FSA, then they have to call Social Security Administration, and then the Social Security Administration refers them back to FSA, and then they can't create an FSA ID. So know that that is one of the biggest challenges right now. But each contributor, so a student and a parent, must have their own FSA ID. Okay, they have to. Now, for your parents that file married filing separately, many people do it for whatever reason, but in that case, if they are married but they file separately, those parents will have to both have an FSA ID to provide consent and approval to have their tax information imported. Okay, they both have to give consent and approval and fill out and be considered contributors to the form. But in the case for anyone else, so parents who are unmarried but living together also need to both have an FSA ID and provide consent and approval for their tax information and to sign the form. But we've seen the biggest challenges so far with for parents who don't have socials, that they are unable to create their FSA ID right now. And FSA does not have what they call a workaround, or they don't have a resolution quite yet for those error messages. They know that the error messages should not be showing, but they are still figuring that out. So what does this mean? I want to make sure I show you those screenshots of what this looks like for parents who are going through this process of who don't have a social, so and are creating an FSA ID for the first time. They have updated, so Federal Student Aid has updated their account creation page. So you'll see at the very bottom here in the red box, it'll say your social security number if applicable. And so that is for those folks that do not have one, and so that they can move forward with. They're going to be asked to enter demographic information, and this is where you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen that blue checkbox. So they'll enter their demographic information, and if they don't have a social for the parent, they're going to select, I don't have a social security number. They'll check that box and hit continue. This is where after they've entered their demographic information that we're seeing the error messages pop up. Either that there's been an identity match already and that they need to enter their valid social already, or that this is where also they're seeing the error message that a little bit later that they need to contact FSA, and wait times right now to call FSA are very long. And we've heard that some folks are getting disconnected, but once they get through, they're told to go contact SSA or the Social Security Administration. It's been a little bit of a circling around, y'all. But I'm hopeful that FSA will get its life together soon. But this is where we've seen the challenges from families that do not have socials, for those parents of where they're seeing those error messages. Now, there are parents who have gone through this process and successfully created an FSA ID who do not have a social. And that's what they do, is they do select that box of I do not have a social security number. The social security number field will be grayed out, and then they'll be able to press continue and move forward. In this case, for those parents who have successfully created an FSA ID that don't have socials, this is an example of what their knowledge-based questions will look like. They will have between 1 to 4 questions that are going to be generated, and they must answer all of them to proceed. If one of them is answered incorrectly, what's going to happen is that it's not going to verify their information. So these questions have to be answered correctly. And then what's going to happen is that these questions are generated by a credit bureau from what is known as TransUnion questions. So TransUnion is one of the credit bureaus, but no credit check is completed. That's super important if you have families or parents that are just very worried about creating this in the first place, is that this is just no credit check is done. It's just to verify their identity. So in this case, if it does go through, this is what the screen will show you and your parents of, yes, it was a successful creation and verified. It says, yay, your identity has been verified. You can log in and start filling out the FAFSA form for your student. Okay, so that means the parent is able to use their FSA ID. It is active, it is ready to go, and can be used to be considered a contributor to the form. Now, what happens if it was not verified? This is where some folks are seeing this as well, is that if they answer one of those TransUnion questions incorrectly, what's going to happen is that it'll say it was successfully created, the account, but the parent needs to contact FSA to confirm their identity. And so what they'll need to do is they'll be given this number. It's the helpline for, it's 1-800-4FED-AID. I think one of the team put the number in the chat, the full number. But that's their helpline to start that process. From there of how they're going to verify the identity. And so once that person calls, they have to call FSA to start looking up the account and initiate what FSA is calling the identity verification process. That parent is going to receive a case number from FSA, and hopefully in an email as well, and instructions to provide the proper documentation for FSA to verify their identity. Okay, I'm going to show you what that'll look like. They got to submit the documentation, that parent or parents, and then FSA will confirm the identity within 1 to 3 days. It may be longer, it may be as short as 1 day, but this is where I say patience is not my strong suit, but be patient as much as possible. I know that's really easier said than done right now for a lot of families, but their FSA is working, I promise. But this is it will take a couple days to verify their identity. So what does that look like for them? So that parent that doesn't have a social and the account was created but not successfully verified, what they need to do is they need to complete what is considered a attestation form. So they have to call FSA first, get the case number. Then they have to complete the attestation form. And it's going to be the link to the form is going to be in an email sent by FSA. It's also available on studentaid.gov. And you can find it online as well when you just go to studentaid.gov/forms library, and it's at the very bottom of the page under studentaid.gov account, and it's called the attestation form. In addition to that attestation form, they also need to provide a proof of identity through one of the following. They need to give one of the following forms of ID: a driver's license, a state or city ID card, or a foreign passport. If they do not have one of these, okay, then they need to provide the following information. If they cannot provide the first 3 sets, one of the 3 first things that you see, they have to provide a utility bill that is in their name and that's going to match the FSA ID account they're trying to create, and then one of the following forms of ID in addition to that utility bill. They have to have a municipal card, a community ID, or a consular ID card. Okay, so in this case, we have had someone successfully go through that. They've completed an attestation form. I'm going to show you what the home of that front page looks like here in a second, but if the case of an FSA that's been created but not verified, they have to contact FSA first, then they have to complete the attestation form and then provide one of those proof of identities. This is what the attestation, the main page looks like. It's a 4-page document. This is the instructions that they'll be given on how to complete the form and where to email it to. They cannot physically mail it. They'll need to email it to the email that's listed. But this is just the main page of that of the form of what that attestation form looks like. So this is that's just FSA IDs. This is the Parent Wizard tool. As I mentioned, this is built into the application. And so what's going to happen is that a student is going to be asked, are your parents married to each other? If they say yes, they're going to need to say, okay, yes, you're going to be asked to provide information about your parents. If they say no, then I'm going to walk you through what that will look like. So this is really to help them in the case of divorced or separated parents of which parent to report. But say they answer, no, my parents are not married to each other. So if we follow this pathway, it's going to then ask them the question of, do the parents live together? If they live together, they will say yes. So unmarried but live together, it's going to then give them the answer, right? That both parents will need to be reported. But in this case on your screen, we're going to say no, those parents do not live together. And then the next question is going to be asked, did one parent provide more financial support than the other parent over the past 12 months? That is where that question is going to happen. The fine print is the key piece. It says, if both parents provided an exact equal amount of financial support, or if they don't support the student financially, select no and refer to the parent with the greater income or assets in the next question. Okay, so if they answer no, one does not provide more support than the other, then they're going to see the next question. Okay, but if they answer yes, then they're going to be given an answer of which parent to provide, right? To reference that one parent. So know that that is where it key piece. So if they say no, it's then going to say, okay, and to the parent that reports that makes the greater income or assets, and then it's going to ask them, are they remarried? And if no, then it's just that one parent. But if yes, it is that parent that whichever has the greater income or assets and their spouse that will need to be reported on a FAFSA. Now, for reporting tax information, this is going to be one of the first things that folks will do to provide consent and approval for their tax information to be imported from the IRS to the Department of Education. So students and parents are going to see the exact same language, okay? It's a bunch of tax lingo. It's really long, but what it just is explaining everything that will be transferred and what's happening. So after each person logs into the form, whether it be a student or a parent or parents, they will provide their consent and approval for their tax information to be transferred. They have to do this every year. Once they provide the approval, they're set for the year, whether it be a student and a parent, they're set for the year, but they'll have to do this every year a FAFSA form is submitted. Now, a contributor, since everyone is considered a contributor, can revoke their consent at any point that they choose to. If they do that, a student is ineligible for all federal financial aid. Point blank. If a student or parent decides to decline the approval and does not give their approval for the tax information, that student is ineligible for federal financial aid. That includes grants, scholarships, and loans. So please, if after anything today, check the box, have them check the box to make sure that if a student who is eligible for federal financial aid gets that, and they're not excluded from it. Now, there are processing delays among many. First is that FSA has confirmed that colleges, so your students completing their FAFSA, they're hanging out, they added their list of schools, all of that data that a school is going to get they're not going to receive that till the end of the month. Okay, so several weeks from now. Students are not going to be able to make corrections until late January as well. So as well as parents, or updates to their form. So if they accidentally typed in something wrong or they wanted to add another school and they forgot to, they're not going to be able to do that till later in the month. Additionally, FSA did confirm that a student's FAFSA submission summary is not going to be available until later this month as well. So while their forms may be processed, the FAFSA form is going to be processed, which was telling them right now 3 to 5 days, that the review of their answers and everything on that submission summary is not going to be available till the end of the month. In addition to this means financial aid offers will be delayed since colleges are not receiving data from the FAFSA until late in January. This means that they're going to be packaging students at a much later date as well. Now, there are colleges absolutely that have done their best to try and get February out prior to now, right? Like when the FAFSA launches in October, to get aid offers out in February. This most likely will be pushed. I'm going to imagine that most of your students who are applying early action or early decision are going to get their aid offers first. And then your regular decision students are going to come after that. So I would be expecting your aid offers for students to be rolling out well into March and into April, which puts them later in time to make an informed decision about where they want to go. So know that is a big processing delay right now. We do have a brand new FAFSA communication toolkit that you can download for free from us. It's at the isac.org/counselors/FAFSA toolkit. This is a bunch of documents in a PDF form that you can send emails, post on to a newsletter, hang up to say, like, if you want a social media post about it from your district of what can be done, if you can enter your date and time of your workshop that you're having for students to be aware of it. So please feel free to go online and download that. You can certainly email us as well. We'll be happy to provide you a copy of that as well. The other big thing is the financial aid application completion initiative. This is going to be available later for you this month. So for those of you who are familiar with Gap Access and seeing your rosters, this is going to become later in the month once we start receiving FAFSA data. Since we also will not get FAFSA data until the end of the month. And so once that we start receiving that data and can start populating it for you, it's going to be in Gap Access, like it is every year. And you'll be able to see your list of senior students and whether they've completed a financial aid application or not. We also still have the First Generation Scholars Network available for your first gen students to join, to get some additional support as they transition into school and to learn about, hey, you know, your FAFSA is time to be due. Do you need help completing alternative application? So the core, the ISAC core is still available there to get support for your students. Okay, the fun part. I know I went through a lot of that quickly, but those are kind of the biggest things to talk about. I know there's several things in the Q&A, but you do have the ability to have CE and PD requests. So Dada's going to open the chat here and put the link to the CE and PD evaluation. So if you need either of them, you have to complete the evaluation, and you have to do that by 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, the 11th. So you have to complete that evaluation for us. If you are requesting professional development hours, you also have to submit your EIN. In addition to that, we will follow up with you once the deadline has passed to send those out to you. But you have a couple days to do that, but you have to complete the evaluation if you're requesting either of those. So we thank you so much. I know it was a short time.